Dear brothers and sisters, my appreciation for your presence here tonight for a very special vigil that we're keeping for the death of our Holy Father and the funeral that will take place tomorrow. So thank you for your presence and your prayers, especially prayers that we do formally here but are a part of everything that carries on in these days, including tomorrow. We're especially thankful and appreciative of the presence of Bishop Cliff, Bishop of the Diocese of Ontario, who's with us here tonight. Our brother bishop from the community, and he was very kind enough to come and present in person the condolences of the diocese. It's a wonderful gesture and something means a great deal to him, and could I repeat, something very important for me as well. This is a very unique time to celebrate a funeral, and for those who've done it in the past for family members, depending on the circumstances, it can be a little bit of a juxtaposition to think through what takes place because we're torn by emotions in different ways. And I can say that because I buried my mother last year, in this time of the liturgical feasts. And it was a wonderful occasion, even though it was marked by a certain melancholy with the passing of someone dear to the entire family. But the faith of what we celebrate in this week, that is always in the faith and always something that is part of our lives, is such a gift at the forefront of our thoughts and of our celebrations during this week that it really carries and dominates everything that takes place. And that's part of the sentiment of what we experience tonight as well. The death of a Holy Father at a very ripe age of 88, who had done his work and whose health and whose age was slipping away, and probably there was not much of a chance of it coming back again, and a recognition that this was it reached its completion. And he understood that, I'm sure, and was just waiting for the Lord in his goodness to call him to himself, and the mystery that all of us have in our lives. And that is an example that's been given to us in these days and has been given to us in the past from our loved ones and from those who work for us as servants, that is very itself, but it's that communion and that presence of the shepherd who is taking the place of Peter, who is the successor of Peter, whose proximity to Peter was what marked Peter himself, in part marked the unique character of this see and made Rome itself and Peter's tomb there so fundamental for us in our faith. And not having that until a successor is appointed leaves something for us that is missing until the joy of a successor taking that position of service to us, something that is there for our sakes, to build the communion of the churches that exists among us, and to exercise that Petrine office which has been given to the church by Christ and developed and thought through and lived in different centuries and different ages and always lived in different ways, and is given to us as a gift for us to serve us so that we can live our lives and our faith and return everything to the Lord as we've seen in this week. And we'll wait for that to take place, but it's so fitting in this night for ourselves to anticipate in a few short hours a funeral that will take place in Rome and the burial of the Holy Father in a very special place in his heart, and to mark something that comes to an end for us. Something that will be a memory for us, something will be a fruit for us still in our hearts that we'll reflect upon for years to come forward, but is there in our minds now that is still fresh of something that has been given to us. And I'm only going to highlight two things that were very special to me in this time, of so many things that he gave to us because of his unique ability to cut through different aspects of what one is expected to do or what life is expected to be in his position, and allows us to see something that was escaping us, which is so fundamental and central to our faith. And that is in one of his writings, but something he preached about so often as well, was the need for conversion. And we hear that all the time ourselves. We do it daily in the midst of the liturgy when we celebrate Mass. We do it at the end of the day when we recollect ourselves and examine the things that have taken place and what the Lord is speaking to us from that profound place in our conscience. Those things take place, especially in which the Holy Spirit drove us as he drove Christ into a place where we investigated and reflected and allowed Christ to open doors of the sinfulness in our lives so that we could convert and have that movement of our souls back to the Lord who is so dear to us. But what is given to us and what the Holy Father was able to describe for us was something physical in that conversion. A conversion of the eye, and not a conversion from looking at bad things. A conversion to look at the reality of what is before us. And to convert our eyes to see people, especially those who are disengaged and suffering and alienated and really suffering enormously, to see them as Christ would see them. And that is a conversion that is of a deep, profound type within a person. It's not just stepping away from the things that pull us from God. It's doing something almost physical within ourselves, to use a faculty that's been given to us to see, to perceive, and to filter it through something different than what would usually happen with someone who's not living a recollected life. But allowing the gospel to be put in the middle of that as a lens, to allow Christians, and especially those who are asked to serve, to see the people before them as Christ would see them. And because of our fallen nature, which seeps into the depths of humanity of each one of us, it blocks our ability to see as Christ would see. And that is an enormous challenge that he's given to the Church, especially at a time when so much is disintegrating around us and so many are suffering around us. Not to see them as we would have seen them or would react against them in the manner which our heart and its sinfulness would push us to do so, but to allow our hearts to be formed by the gospel and by Christ's heart itself. How would Christ's heart and eyes see this person before us? And that's a legacy that will be given to the Church and go down in the future that will probably not be lost for centuries for us. A conversion which is akin to a conversion that his namesake Francis himself gave to an entire country and to an entire continent and to the Church as well. The ability to see things in a reality that Christ sees. And we know in our weakness, but it's hidden from us how weak we are, that block there is something that has to go away. And is it easy? No, it's not easy, because every time we look the way we want to, we're protecting ourselves from the reality that is also within us. The second aspect, which is so striking in these days, and it's just the reality of the death itself, is a phrase that comes from Paul's letter that he's writing to Timothy about having poured his life out as a libation. And there's that sense at the end of life that I'm sure Pope Francis was going through, as so many others have and do, and as Paul did, that he had taken something in a stage in his life through a conversion that dedicated his life completely to Christ. And in the midst of all of his sufferings and all of his trials and all of the urging that the Holy Spirit had within him to keep moving and to keep preaching and to keep establishing churches and to keep revivifying and refortifying and giving courage to churches through his letters, at some stage his strength starts to give way. And this is life itself that we reflected upon at such depth through our Lenten season. And Paul speaks of it to his beloved Timothy, my life is being poured out like a libation now. Something is poured out as a sacrifice that's not coming back. There's no holiday or time off that's going to get that strength back. That's something that has been poured out now for the one that he loves and the ones who've been given to him by the one he loves. And this is an example that Paul has given to the church in that wonderful phrase, but we all picked up the sense that here was a papacy and a man of an advanced age who first of all had the courage and generosity to take on this task at the age of 75 or 76, at a time when he would be expecting to retire and go back to his community. Then he took on a task which is an endless task, and a task which means giving up everything now. And he lived that and pushed himself in that to the very end, even in the midst of his illness, when so many were commentating whether he's getting better or getting worse. He was convinced, I'm sure, to push himself to the end, to get rid of this last speck of energy so the Lord could take him. And that is a wonderful example for us of what the energies within ourselves and what this life that the Lord has given to us that we're stewards of means in the long run. Is it for our sake, or is it for His sake? And when we are young, it's for our sake, which is very natural, but it ends up in disaster if it continues that way. On with the mission. This is something that we see also in Pope Francis that people haven't picked up probably as much of as how much he just let things be shed from his life that most people would expect to be there. Gave up his homeland, gave up his free time, gave up the ability even to rest as most people would rest, and the work just builds up and builds up and builds up. And the energy starts to seep and to seep and to seep. And this reality, which is life itself, he lived for among us as a sign, not that we kill ourselves in the same manner, but that our hearts are in the same place. And that solicitude that he lived in his vocation for us, we see how closely it represents the solicitude that has been given to Peter, a solicitude and a care for all the churches, a solicitude and care that is akin to the love of a parent, a mother, for a child. And that never goes away, and it never will go away, and the Lord has used that as an example of how essential and never-ending His love is for His holy people. And this is something that He lived and made evident for us. And it's these things that were precious for us, just as this moment. And we'll pass especially with the funeral tomorrow and giving great thanks for something that is given to us. So fitting as well that he'll be buried at St. Mary Major, a church which is very precious to him, and a place where he went often to pray to a special icon to the Blessed Mother before his visits and his pastoral visits to countries and before doing special work. And he had a very deep, deep commitment and devotion to the Blessed Mother, connected, I'm sure, to this sense of care. He wanted her care for the church, her care for Christ, the same thing that she experienced to reside within him and his mission and in the work and his priestly work that he did. And that probably became very evident to all of us to see that connection, that he wanted to be buried close to that, because I think from a very early age this devotion with this special icon was something that was so important to him, something for the salvation of all the Roman peoples, which is a uniquely city devotion, but it meant so much more than that, even in its classical connotations. It is for all the Romans, all the world itself, and that means us as well. We give thanks tonight for this special gift that's been given to us, the gift that it will be given again, but we especially think of the Holy Father today. And with joy of Easter, which never goes away, but mingled with the melancholy and a deep sense of gratitude